Alright, this video changed a few times in the making because what I'm going to be covering has simply evolved so much since its inception. So much so, the original script I had worked so hard on is somewhat futile. So we're going to be stepping back from the fanciful artisanal opening I've constructed out of free-to-use stock footage and start right at the beginning. Welcome to the Accountability Corner. Since this is the first episode ever, I thought I'd give a brief description that'll be just a little bit longer than it will normally be in future Accountability Corners. What's Accountability Corner? Well, I'm glad you asked. See, people get into positions of power sometimes. That's just kind of how things work at the moment. Has for a while in all sorts of different ways. Most of the time, thankfully, we elect these people. Elected officials, we call them. People put in a position to create change, represent voices, and serve communities on any scale to ensure we are operating at our utmost moral decency and taking into account the people they are in charge of. Or at least that's probably how politics would work if things were perfect. And since it's pretty far from perfect, projects and conversations like this one start to pop up. The point is that people exist in positions of power, and as we see a lot of the time, conflicts happen. And wow, I'm really presenting this in the most vanilla way possible, but to be honest, I think that's just because, since I've already written the rest of this video, I wanted to ease us into it. The real point is sometimes we have elected officials who do or say awful things and carry, if not promote, beliefs that are harmful to the lives of others. When things like this happen, we need to have conversations, but we're all people who have experienced the world and the people in it, so we know better. Sometimes those parties, the official, oftentimes even their supporters, are super not interested in having a conversation. Screaming matches, more often than not, arguments and debates if you're really lucky, but rarely genuine conversations that actually work out. So when all else fails, and we can't get to the core of the problem by having a genuine, open conversation, we simply need to talk about it so that other people know what's going on. By people talking about these things, from wrongdoings to atrocities, there's at least some degree of accountability. Supporters of these people who need accountability taken on them are upset at that, because they witness vessels in which their own ideologies can flourish. They watch these vessels being attacked, and if those are in danger, they are in danger. There are elected officials who aren't exactly under the eye of the entire nation, though. For example, I'll probably never be making a video like this about the president because way more people who are way more qualified are on that. If a national figure does something bad, you're likely gonna hear about it. But small towns have elections too, who'da thunk? And when small town officials promote harmful ideas, there's much less of a pushback, especially if you live right here in Del Norte County, a rural conservative pocket in Northern California. Good segue, huh? Roger Gitlin, 1st District Supervisor of Del Norte County, California. Says so right here on his Facebook page. Actually, he says a lot of things right here on his Facebook page. In fact, that's a big part of why we're here. Roger Gitlin is the star of our very first ever Accountability Corner. And you know what? So much has been going on recently that's why this video, and its following parts, are going to be the way that they are. Originally, this was going to be one large, encompassing work, but there are a lot of things I really want to highlight in a timely manner, so other details are going to be added in the second part. In this video, we will be covering what inspired this project to be made, community responses to the actions that have inspired that, and the rally that resulted from it. The next video will be dealing with more of a historical, leading up to this point approach. And so it's funny, actually. Writing the original script for this, it was written in a chapter-by-chapter format, but the speed, action, and vibe of what's been going on here is almost like a movie. So yeah, let's go with that. Let's set the scene with a healthy dose of exposition. Roger Gitlin is the 1st District Supervisor of Del Norte County. That's this place. It's all that yellow bit. You know, it's kind of like the Safeway. Denny's is there on the side. Front Street. A whole lot going on in there. A lot of district in District 1. Setting shift. The Del Norte County website. Ooh. Board of Supervisors section. His current term started back in January 2017 and ends in December of 2020. He will be retiring come January. I wanted to visit this site briefly because the rest of this video is going to focus a lot on another website. Boom, Facebook. The mouthpiece for Roger Gitlin, which is his Facebook profile. Remember that because it's going to come up later. The profile of Roger Gitlin will really give you a good cross-section of his ideas. A cake made up of COVID denial, harassing the homeless, racism, and, well, I'd keep going, but I'd be getting ahead of myself. Truly, it is where a lot is going on, and it's where our first act takes place. I think when you hear a story that starts with, well, there's this Facebook post, it brings up a lot of feelings simultaneously, like the urge to stop listening to the story. To cut the fluff, on July 10th, 2020, Roger Gitlin made the following post inciting hate speech. And in full honesty, I'm going to reuse a clip of me reading it for the KFUG Community Radio newscast News Now, because reading it the first time was a lot on its own. Here's that post in full. The following is the post in question from Roger Gitlin. Quote, "This is Franklin Graham, son of Billy Graham, who delivered this powerful speech to the congregation of the First Baptist Church of Jacksonville, Florida. Franklin's every word speaks for me and millions of other Americans. I hope you pass this post on to your Facebook friends." Beginning the quote of Franklin Graham's speech, "Time is like a river. You cannot touch the water twice because the flow has passed will never pass again. America will not come back. The American dream ended November 6, 2012. The second term of Barack Obama has been the final nail in the coffin for the white Christian males who discovered, explored, pioneered, settled, and developed the greatest republic in the history of mankind. Coalition of black, Latinos, feminists, gays, government workers, union members, environmental extremists, the media, Hollywood, uninformed young people, the forever needy, the chronically unemployed, illegal aliens, and other fellow travelers have ended Norman Rockwell's America. You will never again outvote these people. It will take individual acts of defiance and massive displays of civil disobedience to get the rights we have allowed them to take away. It will take zealots, not moderates and the shy, not reach across the aisle, rhinos, Republican in name only, to right the ship and restore our beloved country to its former status. People like me are completely politically irrelevant, and I will probably never again to be able to legally comment on or concern myself with the aforementioned coalition, which has surrendered our culture, our heritage, and our tradition without a shot being fired. The Cocker Spaniel is off the porch, the Pit Bull is in the backyard, the American Constitution has been replaced with Saul Alinsky's rule for radicals, and the likes of shyster David Axelrod and international socialist George Soros have been pulling the strings of the beige puppet and has brought us Act 2 of the New World Order. The curtain will come down, but the damage has been done. The story has been told. Those who arrive after this generation will again have to risk their lives, their fortunes, their sacred honor to bring back the republic that this generation has timidly frittered away due to white guilt and political correctness. In God we trust. Thus ends the end of Franklin Graham's speech, and continues Roger Gitlin's original wording. Thank you, Franklin Graham. God bless you. Signed, Roger Gitlin. Let's break this whole mess down. First of all, who's Franklin Graham? This isn't a rhetorical question to act as a lead-in for this section of the video. I genuinely had no idea who this man was when I started, so I did my own research, and I'll be including that if you're in the same boat as me. Immediately upon searching Franklin Graham's name, my screen was filled with red links. Let me explain. I use a Google Chrome extension called Shinigami Eyes. It is a database in which users of the extension can see if a social media link, meaning it's typically a person, organization, or group in question, is highlighted as anti-trans or trans-friendly. If the link is blank, no submission has been made, or it has not yet been reviewed if one has been made, or if it's neither category and as such is just a regular link. If the link is green, that person's link was sent to the database, reviewed by the team behind the extension, with a sample of the post provided, and determined to be safe and supportive towards transgender and non-binary people. If the link is red, like we see on all of Franklin Graham's links, except his Instagram for some reason, that person's link was sent to the database, reviewed by the team using strict ruling measures, and is determined to be anti-trans, meaning that person is transphobic. This is meant as a tool for transgender and non-binary people, such as myself, to be cautious of certain figures online. Keeps us a little bit safer in a world where we still have an annual day to commemorate our fallen, especially disproportionately against transgender women of color. Just putting that out there because, needless to say, this would set a certain tone for my future findings. It's also interesting to note the kind of person Roger Gitlin is supposedly quoting from, the kind of person who fully speaks for him. Franklin Graham's Wikipedia page describes him as, quote, a Protestant evangelist and missionary. Graham frequently engages in Christian revival tours and political commentary. He is currently president and CEO of the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association and of Samaritan's Purse, an international Christian relief organization. I skimmed briefly through his pages. It has things you may expect from a religious leader. Posts that simply quote passages of the Christian Bible, and commentary on articles in which tragedy has occurred, and he asks that his followers pray for those afflicted. Basic content. However, before you even see some of this basic stuff, his political views are made quite clear. He is anti-choice, vocal against abortion, and he uses that to spread a typical abortion is murder type message. We also see patterns of him speaking out against the Black Lives Matter movement, in which he quantifies such things like how the murder of George Floyd is despicable, but the looting and burning stages were unnecessary and thus makes it null and void, something that anyone with a social media profile anywhere has likely seen, in which items are placed above human lives. And in many cases, the kind of Fox News items we've seen in which a black person is speaking against the movement, which white opposers to the movement are typically seen quoting because it gives them an opportunity to say, "Ah, they said it for us." This continues quite a bit throughout his pages. Oh, and I did follow up on why he was marked as anti-trans. While I won't be reading the incredibly long page, let's just say he's been visibly marked for a reason. But this is not the accountability corner for Franklin Graham. I just wanted to give you a quick peek into the kind of person Roger Gitlin says speaks fully for him. Oh, and actually there's a problem with that, one thing I should mention. So first of all, this is an older speech, and Franklin Graham did not give it. Snopes claims this speech is misattributed. The only factual element to this item is its attribution, which is incorrect. These words were not delivered at the Jacksonville Pastors Conference in January 2015 by Franklin Graham. This item had already been circulating anonymously for more than 2 years prior to that event, attributed to no particular individual or publication. But let's move forward into the speech itself. Break it down piece by piece, even if only briefly, because hoo boy, there is a lot there. The second term of Barack Obama has been the final nail in the coffin for the white Christian males who discovered, explored, pioneered, settled, and developed the greatest republic in the history of mankind. Discovered, explored, pioneered, settled, and developed. Those are some very brave liberties to take in describing the colonization and genocide that Europeans committed against the indigenous peoples whose lands we stole. Not only does it immediately brush off the traumatic atrocities committed by the white settlers who have pillaged and destroyed entire cultures in order to steal land for their own development, but it utterly glorifies it. Or how, after destroying the culture of those who were here first, we built a new civilization on the backs of slaves whose blood greased the gears of this supposed greatest republic. This grim legacy, too, is something that the author of this post claims is in danger. It is supposedly a bad thing that a nation with this history is in some way changing. I don't know about you, but I still see an awful lot of white Christian males around. I've already talked about quite a few in this video so far, who seem to be doing pretty well for themselves. Of course, we know from grade school the diluted version of how we've stripped the indigenous tribes of their lands, culture, and lives. But let's make it a little bit more real. California. Northern California especially has an extensive history of indigenous genocide. Benjamin Madley's book, An American Genocide, talks quite in depth about this. How the indigenous population stood at about a potential 150,000 at around 1846, and how by the end of 1873 they numbered more closely to 30,000. That's a chilling genocide of 80% of an entire population. The description of the book reads, Benjamin Madley is the first historian to uncover the full extent of the slaughter, the involvement of state and federal officials, the taxpayer dollars that supported the violence, indigenous resistance, who did the killing, and why the killings ended. This deeply researched book is a comprehensive and chilling history of an American genocide. I personally recommend it if you would like to educate yourself on the atrocities taken against indigenous people right here in Northern California. Moving on to the next big line. A coalition of black, Latinos, feminists, gays, government workers, union members, environmental extremists, the media, Hollywood, uninformed young people, the forever needy, the chronically unemployed, illegal aliens, and other fellow travelers have ended Norman Rockwell's America. Quite a few things right here, and I don't know where this coalition is, but sign me up. I do cover the grounds of feminist, gay, media, young people, and I'd automatically qualify as uninformed to this dude, I'm sure. And hey, if you count my fluoxetine prescription, probably the forever needy, but I've yet to receive any invitation. I know that we're crossing the streams of time just a bit, with this coming in and out of circulation at different points, so let's answer this both in looking at Obama's cabinet and Trump's cabinet, if we're talking about coalitions of power. And here, we'll look at the Congress too, to really get a big wide picture. Here's a picture of Obama's cabinet. Over half are white, but there's a sizable difference in this compared to past cabinets. Here's the 111th Congress, which would have been the active congressional session during the time this was written. I'm seeing an awful lot of white people, especially white men in charge. Interesting stuff. I don't see any coalitions here. Hey, let's do the same for Trump. Cabinet, 116th congressional meeting. Interesting. You can see that this disproportion is even greater. And another thing. Norman Rockwell's America. According to this post, the America imagined by Norman Rockwell is more or less destroyed. I will admit, I did not know a ton about his work, and in fact, before this video, I knew fairly little about the American painter. So for anyone who doesn't know, as stated by his Wikipedia, an American painter and illustrator. His works have a broad popular appeal in the United States for their reflection of American culture. Rockwell is most famous for the cover illustrations of everyday life he created for the Saturday Evening Post magazine over nearly 5 decades. Looking into his works, you get this very strong sense of a 50s America. You know, that whole American dream aesthetic of the housewife, whimsical children with dogs nearby, bowler hats, working men with hats, or if not hats, the same old framed glasses, Santa Claus, the whole 9 yards. America. The America we saw during a time of segregation. The America we see in this picture. This is the America Norman Rockwell saw. I noticed a theme in the few paintings that depicted black people. An article from the Washington University in St. Louis, Norman Rockwell and Race Complicating Rockwell's Legacy, written by Abisola Jagid, has an interesting line. While Rockwell's name is most often evoked as a symbol of an idolized conservative white American past, looking at Rockwell's actual career reveals a more complicated truth. The evolution of Rockwell's depictions of race over the course of his career demonstrates not only changes within his own personal ideology, but changes within American culture itself. I actually ended up getting really into this article, as I was torn with how to present these next few points. This article was written by a black woman, someone whose thoughts on this weigh far more in importance than my own, and I would really like to echo what she wrote. And either way, I think it brings up a very interesting point about the kind of America that Rockwell saw. Going into this, I thought that the paintings came off as very white savior-y, the trope in which some person of color is saved by the white hero of the story. We see this in The Help, for instance, where the story was changed from black women sharing their stories to a white woman sharing their stories on their behalf, being the hero that they needed all along.
The film Hidden Figures is based on a true story. Couple problems here though. It turns out that Al Harrison never even existed. A white character who saves a person of color from their troubles. Troubles that the person of color can't save themselves from. The white savior trope has been utilized since the beginning of filmmaking.
The white savior plotline is a rich vein that we've seen much of. But reading this article actually made me step back a bit. I was reminded by this article of some key details that I didn't take into account. Quoting Jagid's article, in 1916, Rockwell started working as a cover illustrator for the Saturday Evening Post, a position that he held for nearly 50 years. During his time with the Post, Rockwell became famous for his sentimental portraits of American life, and his covers depicted a simpler, more wholesome version of America. However, it is important to note what was missing from these illustrations. Due to the rules of the Post, Rockwell's America was almost exclusively white, and minorities were only represented if they were in servile positions. While the Post seemed to relax their rules a bit by this 1960s, publishing Rockwell's multi-ethnic Do Unto Others cover in 1961, their pace of change was not quick enough. In 1963, Rockwell traded his position at the Post for one at Look magazine, a publication that was more comfortable discussing and illustrating the racial realities of the time. The reason I had jumped onto the white savior narrative is in part due to these servile positions. It showed morality and goodness in scenes like this, where in servile positions both parties are happy to some extent, as though there's an insinuation the white boy is treating the black servant amicably. This sort of relationship of white kindness or even protection, as we see again in the Ruby Bridges painting here. But is it possible that this is because Rockwell had no other choice than to present these situations this way? To summarize some of Jagid's article, Look magazine encouraged Rockwell to continue these racial narratives. Southern Justice, which is also known as Murder in Mississippi, represents, quoting Jagid, Published in 1965, was painted in response to the murder of 3 civil rights workers in Mississippi a year prior. Andrew Goodman, James Earl Chaney, and Michael Henry Schwerner went missing after their work in civil rights in Mississippi, during a time when KKK membership was skyrocketing with more than 10,000 members. To summarize this case, KKK lynchings and burnings of buildings were at an all-time high, and they were prepared to use violence against the civil rights movement. Goodman, Chaney, and Schwerner had actually just barely missed being involved in the burning of one Mount Zion Baptist Church, where Schwerner used to work. The 3 visited the remains and, on their drive back, were spotted by police, and had their vehicle recognized as belonging to the Congress of Racial Equality, or CORE. They were charged for speeding, taken in for investigation, escorted by Sheriff's Deputy Cecil Price, and they were denied getting to make a phone call. CORE called the jail to inquire about the 3, but the jail denied ever receiving that call. The 3 men were released, told to leave the county, and were never seen alive again. Their vehicle was later found smoldered, and even later, their bodies were discovered buried on a farm. The case received national attention at the time, with more than 200 FBI agents on the case, searching for their bodies and looking to prosecute. Schwerner's wife, Rita, however, claimed that this was the case solely because Schwerner and Goodman were white. If it had just been Chaney, a black man, it would not be in the news, because hearing that a black man was murdered in Mississippi is, quoting what she said, not news. Rockwell's painting displays these 3 men. To quote the conclusion of Jaquid's article, with a career that spanned nearly 6 decades, Norman Rockwell was perfectly situated to witness perhaps the most rapidly changing era in American history. Rockwell's changing depictions of race throughout his career directly mirror the larger cultural shifts that were happening at the time. Therefore, instead of reducing Rockwell to just one period of his career, it would be more accurate to view Rockwell as a symbol of 20th century American racial progress. So we have a few options here when we talk about the final nail in Norman Rockwell's America. What is Rockwell's America? On one hand, it is someone in a place of privilege, realizing the importance of unity, of civil rights, of human decency. On the other hand, it falls into white saviorism, even if it comes from a well-meaning place. So on either hand, what is this final nail? When Roger Gitlin says this speech speaks fully for him, what exactly does that mean? Does he know? One thing for certain is that it means that traditional American values are being attacked. That is usually the core of the topic of Rockwellian American devastation. But what value is being attacked here? If there is a message of unity from Rockwell, does the insinuation that this coalition exists, that power is being spread equally to the marginalized, the oppressed, the walked over, talked over, disenfranchised, and beyond, is somehow a bad thing? That this uplifting is a step away from Rockwell's vision of unity? Or let's go with Rockwell falling into the white savior category. Is the insinuation there's some coalition of power a threat to that? Is Rockwell's America an America where the marginalized must be guided, hands held, way shown by straight white cisgender Christian men? I would genuinely like to know. So if you see this, Roger Gitlin, please clarify. What is Rockwell's America? And why are you so scared of losing it? Why is growth, why is change, what makes it lost? People like me are completely politically irrelevant, and I will probably never again be able to legally comment on or concern myself with the aforementioned coalition which has surrendered our culture, our heritage, and our tradition without a shot being fired. People like him, his culture, his heritage, his tradition. And if we're still pretending that Franklin Graham said this, or even Roger Gitlin, who this speaks for, or whichever straight Christian white man wrote this, well, as we've established earlier, they seem to be doing pretty alright. The Cocker Spaniel is off the porch. The pit bull is in the backyard. So I had an excuse with me rambling about the Norman Rockwell thing, because that was thematic and provided some historical backing, but at this point, I'm just too tired to talk about the blatant racism behind this one. Plenty of people have written wonderfully in-depth articles that address the roots of how anti-pit bull movements are centralized in racism towards black folks. Pit bulls, once called nanny dogs, because they were so protective and loving of children that you could leave them right there with them. Dogs so dependable, in fact, that in the 70s, poor Latinx and black residents of urban cities would adopt them due to their affordability, protectiveness, and companionship. A shift that changed the way these dogs were viewed. Vilifications soon arising with myths of all kinds. Myths that you'll see today that caused dogs like these to be shot unwarranted by police officers in heartbreaking videos that you can find all over the internet. To think, a dog vilified so horrendously because of their association to a group of people that the atrocities done against them become reflections. And in the words of Roger Gitlin, Franklin's every word speaks for me and millions of other Americans. I hope you pass this post on to your Facebook friends. Thank you, Franklin Graham. God bless you. So you heard my thoughts on it. You watched me break down even just a bit how wrong this speech is. But this post was public from a public official on his public Facebook profile, where he often addresses the public. It did not take very long at all for the community to lash back at this message. I will not hide for a moment that I was thankful to see the community response to this post, and to Gitlin's act of spreading hate speech in general. This is a good time to bring up that, like any elected official, Roger Gitlin has several strong, staunch supporters. But I also would not be surprised if they show up in hordes to retort against this video. That's kinda to be expected at this point. I do not expect this video to be about changing minds. It is about highlighting actions for those who have not seen them. And, in some ways, to talk about those who spoke up. To highlight the actions of those who deserve to have those actions shared. At the time of writing this, there are 48 comments on the original post that started it all, most of which are fully against the message. Julia Dorman was raised in Del Norte County. She lives in Seattle now, but when she saw this post, she knew she had to speak up. She wrote a message for the Board of Supervisors meeting that happened just after this. Here's the recording of that message.
Julia, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi everybody. Thank you for letting me speak today. I am joining you today as a concerned citizen, and as some of you know very well, someone who was born and raised in Del Norte County. While I am not currently a resident of Del Norte County, I have strong ties to this community, with many friends and family still living in the area. I've returned to this community that I consider home several times each year to visit with loved ones, support local businesses, and enjoy the natural beauty of the Wild Rivers coast. When I did live in this community, I gave my whole heart and soul to it, as I know many people in this area continue to do. And it is the love for my home that compels me to speak out now. I have been following the troublesome posts on Roger Gitlin's Facebook page for some time, where he advocates for people to ignore social distancing guidelines, support businesses that defy state and tribal orders, and even goes so far as to suggest that Sutter Coast Hospital is intentionally misdiagnosing patients with COVID-19 for financial gain. He has been actively encouraging people on his platform to endanger their fellow community members by spreading misinformation about the effectiveness of masks, as well as recommending that his followers carry fake mask exemption cards. This rhetoric alone should be enough to render him ineligible to hold public office, but this week, Roger took it one step further. He reposted the written version of a speech that some people have credited to Franklin Graham, an evangelist who supports conversion therapy and has been publicly criticized by the NAACP. In his post, Roger declares, "Franklin's every word speaks for him." This post, which I included in my original email to the board, is obviously racist, homophobic, and discriminatory in almost every other sense. Roger makes it very clear in this post that he only intends to represent the interests of the white, straight Christians in his district, no exceptions. He has no consideration for the wonderful diversity that makes Del Norte County so special, including its tribal communities, Latinx communities, Hmong communities, among others. He has no regard for the potential harm he is inciting towards the communities referenced in this post, and he continues to tolerate comments on his page making fun of and promoting harm against members of the LGBTQ community. This is absolutely unacceptable behavior from an elected district supervisor who is called to represent all of his constituents equitably and who is currently financially supported by Del Norte County taxpayers. As elected officials, you have an obligation and a responsibility to condemn Roger's rhetoric at the very least. Roger and his hyperbole will likely contribute to longstanding mistrust in the board by those that feel targeted by his comments. His discourse only serves to polarize the people who live in and visit this community. This will undoubtedly drive residents and tourists away from Del Norte County at a time when this community needs their support more than ever. I've been so impressed to see Del Norte County rise in ways that I never imagined, and I would hate to see that moment.
There's 3 minutes. Would you please wrap it up?
Yep, last sentence. So I have been so impressed to see Del Norte County rise in ways that I never imagined, and I would hate to see that momentum hindered due to the inflammatory language of an elected official. I urge you all to take swift action to censure Roger and his hate speech and make it clear that you stand with and support all residents of Del Norte County. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment, Kylie?
I had the opportunity to talk to Julia Dorman about this experience, as well as the unforeseen consequences that came with daring to speak out against this incitement of hate.
My name is Julia Dorman, and I am from Del Norte County, born and raised, and I currently live in Seattle. Like I had mentioned in my letter, I had been following Roger Gitlin's posts for a while. I think kind of really ever since the rallies to open the county back up started, because it was a little concerning to me as somebody who has a lot of loved ones still living there. You know, I saw this post and it was so blatantly racist and with so many gross stereotypes and containing a message that I thought was so harmful that I felt like I needed to comment. And as an aside, I had only really commented on one of his other posts, and it was very calm. It was very, saying, oh, this article isn't very accurate and it's not really applicable to the community that you're serving. So this was kind of the first time that I had really, shared a comment like this on his page. And I think I was hoping and naively thinking that maybe a strong condemnation of this post might result in him removing it. And of course that did not happen. And instead, to my surprise, he ended up blocking me from Facebook. And I found out he also blocked my brother from Facebook. I found out he blocked 2 of my friends who liked our comments. And, it started to get me thinking, how many other people has he blocked? And how many other people don't get to contribute to this narrative? And how many other people maybe just don't even know that he's posting things like this that are so harmful. And so that kind of led me to write to the board of supervisors because I wanted to make sure they knew that these are the kinds of things he's posting, and that they very well may be informing the things that he proposes and the things that he votes on. So yeah, so I wrote to them. So after sending the email, I found out there was going to be a board meeting the following week. And so I thought I would share my public comment because I wanted to make sure that people heard that this is going on, that he's posting things like this that I think are very harmful. When I had sent the email, worst case scenario, I just figured that nobody would respond to it and I wouldn't hear anything back from any of the board of supervisors, or that maybe Roger would respond to it, which I was fine with as well. I made sure to CC him on that email. But instead, I woke up the next morning and I have a flood of emails from people that I do not know. And they were defending Roger and, saying things like that I'm an outsider and that I have no right to comment on what he posts on his Facebook page. And if I don't like what I see, just don't look at it. One of the more surprising emails that I got was from somebody who shared that they were a former city council member And this former city council member took the initiative to CC even more people on her email to me. This included, people that she said were on the Taxpayers Association and the Del Norte Republicans. And, all the while Roger is CC'd. It was unbelievable to have, number one, a current elected official sharing my personal email, and then a former elected official sharing my email with even more people. And I guess one thing I would just like to add that I think is important is that I had responded to 2 of these emails. And then when I got a couple more, there was one that referenced a family member and that family member's business. And I kind of had to stop for a moment and realize that this retaliation was so much more than just retaliation against me for saying something. It was retaliation against innocent members of my family who have not said anything about this person. And it was a little scary in that way. Everyone has different ideas and different opinions, and my opinions are my own. I speak for myself. I do not speak for any of my family members or my friends that I know there. So I would just like to throw that out there, that I don't think it's very appropriate to attack other people who are related to me in that way. I'm an adult. I can hold my own. We don't need to bring other people into this. Another thing that I would like to say, to address the people who said, if I don't like those posts, just don't look at them. I very much believe that topics like racism and homophobia are not really debatable topics. Silence often equates to violence, and I am not one to let people promote violence. One thing I would like to say to, I think, any elected official in Crescent City or Del Norte County is to just keep in mind who is not in the room with you, and to consider maybe who does not have a seat at the table. I'm not saying that they're not doing this right now already, but I just, I think it's important for people who are in decision-making positions to really continue to reevaluate if their actions, their votes, their posts, and their focus as elected officials are representing everyone in their district and in their community to the best of their ability. One thing that I've been thinking about a lot recently, especially with some new posts that have been made, is I would encourage everyone to actually read the articles that people are posting and not just the sharer's summary of what they got out of the article. Roger Gitlin is someone who is notorious for doing this, where he will post an article like the one he posted just the other day of, it was an article talking about the public comment period, talking about how he was the only one to not vote for the proclamation in support of equity, equality, and accountability. But all he talked about was how the board changed a line of wording in his proclamation in support of law enforcement. And he twisted it to create this narrative that the board does not support law enforcement, when really, if you read the article, it says that it passed unanimously, and even he voted for it. But then you look at the comments, and it's clear that people are not reading that. They're only reading his summary and saying, oh, of course the board doesn't support law enforcement. And, there are numerous examples out there of Roger doing this with articles. And so I just really, really want to encourage people to read the article for themselves.
I don't think I need to talk about how disgusting it is to leak someone's email so that your supporters can attack them. But one thing I do want to point out is that Julia Dorman and the people she listed are far from the only people who have been blocked. Most of my coworkers, friends, acquaintances, people that I know who have commented against him have all been blocked too. People I have talked to about this story, who I plan to interview in the second part of this, have all been blocked. And if it weren't for one tiny detail, that would be illegal. Remember how I said this was Gitlin's Facebook profile? A court ruling made it official that blocking people from a Facebook page is illegal as it infringes upon the First Amendment of the Constitution. Unfortunately, the wording in that is Facebook page. Gitlin is operating from a Facebook profile, which is viewed differently. Even though he is definitely using his profile the same way one would use a page, it is still technically a profile, which means Gitlin would be committing a violation if it were not for a single hair's width of legal wording. So despite actively blocking people from seeing these public things that are clearly intended to be public, he can technically do this and not much can really be done, simply because he operates from a Facebook profile rather than a page, even though it accomplishes the same thing. But the voice of the people you see cannot be contained so easily. We see that with federal officers beating innocents in major cities advocating for the right to not be murdered by law enforcement, so the Facebook block button isn't going to be that much of a challenge to overcome. Okay, we gotta get through this before I can continue to what was actually supposed to be next, which is that Gitlin got mad at a billboard. Here's my report on that from a previous newscast to catch you up to speed. There have since been even more kinds of posts. One that especially caught my eye regarded what has become apparently a controversial matter, somehow. Here's the post in his own words. Quote, "Shame on the California endowment. I am aware this billboard has brought lots of unhelpful talk among social media. Inserting the very serious COVID-19 pandemic dilemma into politics, the California endowment has mixed partisan, divisive opinion, with public health in erecting this billboard entering Crescent City. Those who thought long and hard on who and what should appear on this public display failed abysmally in bringing our community together. All lives matter should have been the message, a message of bringing our diverse groups together. Noticeably missing is any reference to European American inclusion. The face declaring the ending of racism only underscores the racist mindset of the California endowment. The inclusion of the clenched fist sends a terrible message to our community. Tragic. The billboard is exclusionary and insulting to Del Norte County and changes no minds, further polarizes us, and widens the Grand Canyon-esque gap between our diverse cultures. This shameful display should be taken down immediately, and continued funding for the California endowment should be reconsidered." End quote. As I said, capping his previous post in the previous newscast. Woo, a lot to unpack. For context, in case you have not seen this billboard, it depicts a group of people, headshots you can say that are closely cropped in on their shoulders and up. The sign reads, "I wear my mask to protect my family, to support frontline workers, to build a new future." The group of people, 7 in total, are each wearing masks that say something on the front. They are as follows: protect our elders, universal health care, Black Lives Matter, dreamers, paid leave, vote, and end racism. These very basic, very regular things to say that any basic, moral, normal person would engage and agree with have seemingly caused an outrage, as we perhaps should have come to expect. Since then, Gitlin has gotten so mad at this billboard that he reached out to Redwood News down in Eureka, as different from Redwood Voice by the way, we're different organizations, I know names can get confusing, to demand that Redwood News speak on his disagreement with that. A story was written of it, which thankfully included the views of the community at large, which was against Gitlin, as well as a statement from District Supervisors Jerry Hemmingson and Bob Berkowitz. Hemmingson said that this message was not controversial, and that Gitlin was trying to make it controversial. Berkowitz said that it wasn't that the message did not align with the community's beliefs, but that the message did not align with Gitlin's beliefs. Okay, now we've got that covered. This plot twist has unfortunately made a 3-act piece into a 4-act one, or at least definite fluffing of Act 1, but later into the story. Either way, I mention this as we delve into the risen version of the community response, as they rallied together in front of the Flint Center to make it absolutely clear that Roger Gitlin's ideas were not welcome here. the Flynn Center sees a gathering of people. Neighbors, community members, youth, all united to speak against Gitlin, to make absolutely clear he does not represent us. It was a foggy, windy morning, but dozens had already gathered. More would come soon. Denise Doyle Schnacker, the organizer of this rally, took to the microphone to make the first announcements.
Thank you guys for being here. We don't have, so the Board of Supervisors are actually not on site. Well, maybe they are, but we can't go in. So some of us are choosing to join the Zoom link and make our statements today during public comment.
Denise, as she always does with the events she organizes, opened it up to those at the rally. She wanted to hear what people had to say, and people had some things to say. I wasn't able to get all of their names, but I was able to record some of what was said, even in the midst of all the heavy ambience.
Can you guys hear me? So in Roger Gitlin's post, he attacked quite a few people, pretty much everyone who's probably standing here right now. But think of the people that Roger Gitlin attacked and said did not belong to have a voice. School teachers are government employees. The people who work on the road are government employees. Roger Gitlin is in charge of helping to manage this county, and he is disrespecting every single person who actually works for the county to improve where we live. That's not even talking about the numerous other people that he disrespected, and the fact that the other supervisors have yet to call him out says that they are either complicit in his support and supporting his message, or are afraid of him. Silence has always been known as consent. Yep. Always. Yep. Throughout history, anytime that someone has been silent, it has been understood that they have accepted what has occurred. So we should understand this to be that the supervisors agree with Gitlin, or they should make a public stance condemning the things that he has said. There is no other option.
There is no place in this country for such unabashed and toxic statements. It is embarrassing that the other supervisors remain silent on these issues in some cases and loudly agree with Mr. Gitlin. Delnart County is better than this ignorance and hate. We need county leaders who are educated, professional, and desire unity, not those who push a hateful and racist agenda. This rhetoric is disgusting, and your silence serves as an agreement with this hate-filled rambling. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. You cannot bring integrity and professionalism to your positions as supervisors. Delnart residents will be happy to begin recalling what supervisors are left after November 3rd. This behavior is unacceptable. Delnart County is no place for hate. I want to point out something that I'm sure a lot of other people noticed too, and that is the fact that a lot of the Republicans, hardcore Republicans especially, like to claim that the liberal politics is trying to erase history. Yet in that post, he claimed that he gave credit to white Christian men for founding this country, completely erasing any type of contribution that a person of color or woman has made to the foundation of this country, and completely ignoring the sacrifice that Black people and Native American people had to endure through genocide and slavery in order to give us the privileges that we have today. And that is something that people don't want to talk about. They want to claim that because we do not support Confederate names being celebrated, or Confederacy being celebrated, or racism, that we are trying to erase history, when in reality all we're trying to do is give credit and give respect to the people who deserve it, who sacrificed so much during the foundation of this country.
As we were gathered outside, speaking out, speaking to one another, getting supportive honks from cars, and the occasional heckler or two throughout the entire thing, a pretty impressively low number if you ask me, we awaited the Zoom call of the Board of Supervisors meeting to start. Some of those rally attendees prepared speeches for the public comment period to ensure what they said would be heard. First, Denise called in to set the groundwork for all the calls that would be coming through afterward.
Denise, you're on.
Hi, my name is Denise Doyle Schnacker, and I'm a resident of Delnart County. We are actually on the front of the Flynn Center steps at the sign with a lot of folks who are very concerned about the lack of leadership or the silence of our Board of Supervisors, who have not spoken up against what Roger Gitlin has said in public regarding our community members. He has incited violence by encouraging community members, my neighbors, to basically erase what we have done in our community, what we are doing in our community. And I'm very concerned about the fact that the other supervisors have not said one word against the racism, the bigotry, the misogyny, the hate speech that their colleague has decided to spew in our community. Recently, specifically July 10th, and then again 2 days ago. And so I am here basically to ask that they step up and denounce hate and bigotry and racism in Del Norte County.
Thank you.
Denise was cut off after this, and the supervisors established an emergency agenda item before taking more public comments, so that it would be more contained during the meeting. But to some of our surprise, or I will admit mine at least, other supervisors in the call beat us to the punch on speaking out. Supervisor Chris Howard spoke out with the following.
And lastly, I'd like to mention I have received several calls and concerns from constituents, similar to what was mentioned during the last public comment about Supervisor Gitlin's actions on Facebook and other social media. There's a definite fear out there. I'm glad one person, and at least at our last meeting, decided to speak out, Ms. Storman. And then also today with Ms. Schnacker's comments. I believe there's no room for these kind of actions or comments from a sitting supervisor. I know censure has been brought up. We've discussed this in the past as a board, but these comments that are being made, there's no room for that type of racism in our community. And I want to make that statement public. There is absolute fear by individuals who have called me for actually speaking out against this particular supervisor for reasons of retaliation and responses that have been made through emails that have been shared with other people that are supportive of Supervisor Gitlin and calling out their businesses specifically, or where their parents even work. So that kind of retaliation strikes fear into the hearts of people in our community. It's a First Amendment free speech thing. I get it. However, as a sitting supervisor, we're here to provide leadership for our community in a positive nature, especially in these trying times with COVID. And that's the statement I'd like to make today, Chairman. And that, on that note, appreciate your time.
Following that, Supervisor Jerry Hemmingson had this to say.
As was mentioned, I get a lot of calls on the COVID issues and what we're doing and where we're going, as well as comments on what was discussed with Roger and his issues. And as he stated from the very start, all he's looking for is attention. And so he's getting that. And I don't want to put more attention on it than it deserves. I do agree with Supervisor Howard, but I'm not going to go into it any further because it really doesn't come to the level of really talking about, in my opinion. You just need to ignore him. There is no value in what he's saying. He's just inciting things. So that's my opinion, which is certainly different than his. So we are going to move on. We'll take up the consent agenda.
And now, music to my ears. Accountability and callouts from members of our community, which I will be playing one after another.
It's typed in Kizzy Blady. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but you're on. You looks like you just have to unmute your mic.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Chris Elton, and that's Kijeb Lady. It means morning lady, Ojibwe. I called in today. First of all, let me thank the supervisors who called out Roger Gitlin. I called in today because I'm not going to be silent in the face of racism in this county. I've watched at home, online, as Del Norte County Supervisor Roger Gitlin has repeatedly made divisive, racist public remarks on social media. And as a Native woman in this community, I'm here to ask the rest of you to continue to hold him accountable. First, I had to watch as he, via social media, invited folks from off reservation to the Log Cabin Diner in Klamath in May. To the people who live in Klamath, Gitlin, you showed us that you have no regard for us or for the sovereignty of the Yurok Nation. The Yurok Reservation has had no cases of COVID-19, and council has kept the reservation closed because we are a high-risk community. Gitlin, your actions caused divisions throughout the county. Not once did the people of Klamath feel as though anyone in authority at the county level was out there supporting us. Where were you, Supervisor Berkowitz? We were left to support each other with the leadership of the tribe. Shame on this county for not stepping in then and doing something about Gitlin's actions. Not only that, Supervisor Gitlin has recently used social media as a platform to expose his racist anti-Black Lives Matter rhetoric. Clearly a response to the proclamation in support of equality and accountability the county voted to declare with his divisive vote of present. On a post, Gitlin, that you've since taken down, you quote Franklin Graham with, quote, "The American dream ended November 6, 2012. The second term of Barack Obama has been the final nail in the coffin for the white Christian males who discovered, explored, pioneered, settled, and developed the greatest republic in history," end quote. I'm not going to read more from this post because this sums up the rest of Graham's ethnocentric and xenophobic views. What you fail to mention is that this land was already occupied. This, the land you stand on, is the home of the Tolowadeni people. And it was through slavery, including Native Americans in California, that this nation was developed. You also failed to acknowledge how those white Christian males acquired such land and resources through oppression, enslavement, kidnapping, and genocide. Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter doesn't say that white lives don't, but white lives have never been under attack the way Black lives have in this nation. This is not an attack on your whiteness. It's an attack on racists and a racist system. It's time to make right the statements of the Declaration of Independence. Black Lives Matter is a response to the historic racism and oppression forced onto our Black brothers and sisters. It's shocking how little folks know about the experiences of Black folks from their emancipation until now. Jim Crow, mass incarceration, police brutality, and this mentality, this white supremacist perspective that guided the laws of the day has never gone away. One of the first questions I asked when I moved to Del Norte in 2007 was, where are the Black folk? I'm reminded of the fact that it wasn't until 1926 that the state of Oregon removed the state ban on Blacks in their constitution. I'm also reminded of the fact that the state of California paid for the extermination of their, quote, Indian problem. I love that little Black boy on that billboard by the harbor declaring that his life matters. It's beautiful and affirming in a land where Black folks have been criminalized repeatedly for the color of their skin since they were drugged to this continent as slaves. Mr. Gitlin, your racist comments on social media are threatening and are not the comments of a leader who wants to bring people together. If there is a time for us to dig deep within ourselves and actually come together, learn about, have hard conversations, and listen to the experiences of our sisters and brothers of color, it is now. As for the other elected county supervisors,
your 3 minutes is up. Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it.
Hi, my name is Michaela.
Oh, okay.
So I moved to this county about a year and a half ago, and I just want to say that as another Native American woman, I never really felt welcome here, and it's because of the constant language that I see represented by Roger Gitlin and many other members in this community of hate and just, intolerance. And I want to say, as a Native American woman, that calling out racism of white people, Mr. Gitlin, is not racist. In fact, racism is institutional, and it is a tactic used to marginalize people of color. White people are not marginalized, therefore white people are not being a target of racism just because people are calling them racist because of their racist actions. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on the consent agenda items?
I have 3 written public comments.
Okay.
The first one is from Mike Thornton. And it says, as the county supervisors are quite aware of outgoing Supervisor Roger Gitlin's continuing campaign of sowing distrust and division in his community, do the rest of you have any plans for cleaning up the mess that he's leaving behind? If so, can you share that with your constituents? The virus of bigotry that Roger Gitlin spreads for his own self-aggrandizement will continue to affect the health of this community for a long time after he leaves, to very likely do the same thing to the people in Medford, Oregon. They have my condolences. I sincerely hope there's a plan to help the community heal from the trauma he's inflicted here. I got another one from Sarah Elston, and it says, I am appalled and saddened by Roger Gitlin's open racism and homophobia seen in the public social media posts. There is no place in this county for such unabashed and toxic statements. It is embarrassing that the other supervisors remain silent on these issues and in some cases loudly agree with Mr. Gitlin. Del Norte County is better than this ignorance and hate. We need county leaders who are educated, professional, and desire unity, not those who push a hateful and racist agenda. I appreciate Mr. Gitlin's efforts to clean up our city. However, at the same time, he's filling that same city with trash in how he perceives and talks about the LGBTQ community and people of color. Del Norte County Board of Supervisors, I urge you to do your job and take your position seriously. This rhetoric is disgusting and your silence serves as agreement with his hate-filled ramblings. You all ought to be ashamed of yourselves. If you cannot bring your integrity and professionalism to your positions as supervisors, Del Norte residents will be happy to begin recalling what supervisors are left after November 3rd. This behavior is unacceptable. Del Norte County is no place for hate. And I have one more written public comment, and it's from Maggie Rasmussen. And it says, it makes me sad to think that our small special community has people who still spew hate, racism, and bigotry. Staying silent only shows your support to these horrible people. Stand up and do your job. Make sure these people know that they don't have your support by being silent. We are all watching your response, and it will be what guides us in the future. Remember, you work for us. And that's it for written. Robert, you are on.
I just wanted to support the other community members that are calling out Supervisor Gitlin. And when he was elected the first time, it was in the newspaper, one of his writings all about him wanting to use the word Negro and trying to figure out how he could use it. And it's always been an issue. But, the one thing I've always looked at as a positive is, when he's not doing this, he's been volunteering to teach at schools and stuff. And so by keeping him in office somewhere, we do keep him out of the education system. So thank you for your time.
I spoke to Denise again at the end of the rally. I had a quick interview with her regarding what it was like to organize this event.
Yeah, so what was it like organizing just a moment for people to come together and to share their views that racism and bigotry and homophobia is not okay in our community? It's not easy in Del Norte County. The only way to do it that I've found is successful is literally by word of mouth and having relationships with people that you can say, hey, this thing is happening. This is how I feel about it. Would you join me? And the gentleman that walked up just a little bit ago that said, who are you? What group is this? Do you have monthly meetings? It's exhausting trying to fight hate in our county. It is absolutely exhausting. So if we were to hold regular meetings, people would be so burned out that that when it came time to do something important, they wouldn't have the bandwidth to do it. At least in my opinion, that's what I've found to be the case. I'm really, really excited that there are more young people here than I've seen at other ones, because I'm gonna die probably sooner than later, and this world is not for me. This world is for the next generation, and we have failed when it comes to educating youth and children and the whole gamut in democracy and what it means to live in a democracy, what your rights are, what your responsibilities are as a citizen. So your responsibility is to be active, is to know what's happening. We don't encourage that, and we don't teach it, and that's a problem. So that's why we do things like this, to get together and say, to model what everyone should be doing, which is engaging with your government. So,
and I know you kind of described this as it wasn't really an organization. This is just neighbors coming together.
Yeah.
But even with that, is there any way that you would recommend for ways to support things like this?
Yeah. So social media. If you see someone being attacked or being called out or whatever, speak up and say something. Don't worry about retaliation, because your other neighbors will be there for you.
She also brought up some very important points about the youth who attended, which there were several of, and who I did attempt to interview, but they were quite shy, and I sure wasn't going to bully them into talking. I've been the sole youth at a protest before, and I know exactly what that can be like. So the last thing I would want was to be to push them. That, I think, is what especially prompted these points from Denise.
I wanted to say one more thing because I tend to talk too much. But Persephone asked me a question, you know, what's one more thing that I wanted to say? And I told her that, you know, when it comes to these kinds of things, usually it's this group over here. It's the older, sorry, I'm gonna put myself in there, guys. It's us people with the gray hair. And
or no hair.
I know this was not intentional at all, but look at this side of the room. And look at over here. Woo! Because I know this is hard. See, we don't care about what our friends think anymore. We we don't. But we know you guys do, and you still put yourselves in societal danger to be here. And just know that if anybody picks on you, says something to you that is hurtful, if anything is just, if you feel in danger emotionally, so physically, you call us. We will make an army to protect you for your rights for democracy.
And after this, the rally was closed with a few last words from Cheryl Steinruck.
Hey, I just want to let everyone know from the bottom of my heart how much I appreciate you all being here, because this is our traditional land, okay? Yeah. This place is called Ta'at, and we have been working, and I'm thankful that you have joined us to do this kind of work. I know there's very few of us, really, and I'm really atypical, if you all know me. But by the same token is that we have a real purpose here, and that's what I want to thank each and every one of you for holding your signs, taking the time out of your lives, like Charlene said, to come down here and be with us. Because what else can we be doing other than protecting our democratic process and our democratic rights? I've grown up with this notion: if you do not exercise your rights, you will lose them. And there's always somebody waiting to take them from you. And I know that for a fact. So what we need to know are what are our rights and what do we have a right to do, and we force the issues. And that's what we're doing today.
And I'm going to end this here, on those high notes. We are beginning to see the potential for accountability, the possibility of consequences for harmful actions. This is only the first part of this video. I wanted to get this out as quickly as possible in order to capture the rally, the community response, all the surrounding bits of recent news so that it would be as well contained as possible. But these are far from the only actions Roger Gitlin has taken, and there is much, much more that he must be held accountable for. Stay tuned for the next part of Accountability Corner as I open the heavy tome of Roger Gitlin's past actions, as I speak to members of our community about some of the many wrongdoings that have been done, that have been conducted, that have been performed, with ultimately little retribution despite the harm that it has brought. But let these moments, let this rally, remind you of the community that we truly are. The voice of hatred is loud, but not loud enough. Not when we all stand together. Things aren't perfect, but they can be improved. They can be changed. We have the hope to do that, don't we? If you made it this far, thank you for watching. I make these stories for a reason. To know that people hear them is enough motivation to keep them going. To know that these stories can inspire others to do good no matter the cost. To combat the many-headed dragon of hate. It really keeps this machine going. This has been the first of hopefully many accountability corners. Thank you for making sure the people in power know who they represent.